The phone wouldn't stop ringing. I stared at the screen, my mother's name flashing over and over like a warning light on a sinking ship. 37 missed calls. I stood frozen under the harsh fluorescent lights of Savannah Memorial Hospital, the cold tile floor grounding me as the summer heat pressed against the glass outside. My hand trembled slightly as I silenced the buzzing device and slipped it back into my coat pocket. I wasn't ready to talk to her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The smell of antiseptic and overbrewed coffee filled the corridor, the familiar sense of a place where life and death constantly collided. My name is Nora Caldwell, and 6 months ago, my so-called sister Brianna Caldwell destroyed my career, my reputation, and nearly my sanity. Now, after all the wreckage she left behind, they wanted me to save her life. The memory came back sharp and unrelenting. The humiliation of being escorted out of the Coastal Biomedical Research Institute, my personal belongings stuffed hastily into a cardboard box, my colleagues avoiding my gaze. Accusations of falsifying research, professional misconduct, lies carefully crafted and fed to the board by the person I had once called family. I clenched my fists as I walked down the hallway, past busy nurses and anxious families. I had promised myself I would never let them manipulate me again. Yet here I was. I rounded the corner and nearly collided with Zoe Mitchell, my closest friend and the only person who had stood by me through it all. She caught my arm, steadying me as she peered into my face. "Nora, what the hell's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I whispered bitterly, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Family." Her dark eyes narrowed immediately. "Brianna." I nodded stiffly. "Acute leukemia. The doctors say I'm the only viable bone marrow match. They want me to save her." Zoe inhaled sharply, her expression hardening. "The same Brianna who sabotaged your grant funding? Who sent those anonymous complaints to the ethics board? Who manipulated Kayla Foster into testifying against you?" "The very same," my voice cracked as I leaned back against the cold wall, the weight of the situation pressing down like a vice around my chest. I barely noticed when my phone buzzed again. Another call. My mother, Eleanor Caldwell. I glanced at the message preview. "I'm on my way to your office. We need to talk. Please, Nora." I let the phone drop back into my pocket. "Speak of the devil." I showed Zoe the screen. "Want me to stay?" she asked gently. I shook my head, exhaling slowly as I straightened my blazer, the old habit of putting myself back together for yet another unwanted confrontation. "No. This is something I have to handle alone." I pushed off from the wall and walked away, my footsteps echoing sharply down the sterile hallway. The war wasn't over. Not yet. The knock came 20 minutes later, sharp and insistent against my office door at the Institute. I didn't even have to look up. I knew that knock. I kept my eyes on the thick file of research proposals spread across my desk as the door swung open without my permission. "Nora, we don't have time for your attitude," my mother snapped as she stormed inside. Eleanor Caldwell, the master of control and perfect appearances, now looked older than I remembered. The soft blonde curls she meticulously maintained streaked with gray, her expensive pearl earrings slightly askew. In her hands, she clutched a worn manila folder like it was a holy relic. She slammed it onto my desk and spread the papers out with shaking fingers. "Here are Brianna's medical records. The procedure is straightforward. You'll be back at work within a week. This is not dangerous. You have to do it." I picked up one of the papers, pretending to read while my pulse hammered. Her audacity, even now after everything, she acted like I owed them something. "Hello to you too, Mom," I said flatly. Her mouth tightened. "Don't be difficult. This is your sister's life we're talking about." The words cut deeper than she knew. I set the paper down slowly, then stood, walking calmly over to the filing cabinet behind my desk. "Funny how that works." My voice remained cold, clinical, detached. When it was my career and my life on the line, no one seemed particularly concerned. "That again." She waved her manicured hand dismissively, her diamond bracelet catching the light. You're still obsessed with those ridiculous accusations? Brianna would never. I have proof. The words came out sharper than intended, but I didn't care. I pulled open the drawer and retrieved a thick file labeled DNA evidence. My mother's face paled. Her voice wavered for the first time as she stared at the bold black letters on the folder. What is that? Insurance, I said softly, against exactly this kind of conversation. Did you honestly think, after what happened, that I wouldn't investigate? That I wouldn't demand answers? You're being ridiculous, she said, but her hands trembled as she tried to gather up the scattered medical reports. I stepped forward and calmly placed the folder on top of them. Your precious daughter isn't my biological sister, Mom. You might want to reconsider how you define family. Her eyes widened, locking on mine, searching for any hint of bluff. There was none. You're lying. I opened the folder and slid the printed results toward her, pointing to the highlighted section. Paternal DNA markers. 0% probability of shared paternity. Brianna isn't Charles Caldwell's child, and we both know my father. Dad would never have suspected. My mother staggered back a step, as if I had physically struck her. I felt nothing. No guilt. No regret. Just cold, clean relief. I suggest you think very carefully about what secrets you're willing to have exposed. I continued, my voice low and deliberate. I will give you my answer in 3 days. Until then, I recommend you stop trying to manipulate me. The tension snapped as my mother yanked her designer handbag off my chair and stormed out without another word, her heels clicking frantically down the polished hallway. Like a queen retreating from a battlefield, she never thought she'd have to fight. I waited until the door clicked shut behind her before sinking back into my chair. My hand hovered over the file as the weight of what I held settled into my chest. I flipped to the last page. There, in stark black ink, lay the undeniable truth that would tear my family apart. Brianna Caldwell wasn't just the woman who betrayed me. She wasn't my sister at all. The next morning, I sat at my dining room table staring at the spread of ancestry results and genetic lineage charts scattered between 2 half-empty coffee mugs. Zoe hovered behind me, arms crossed, scanning the documents over my shoulder. Your dad was Swedish-American, right? She asked quietly. Through and through. I traced my fingers over the long string of Nordic surnames, then down the sharp, undeniable line of Hispanic markers on Brianna's paternal side. There's no way Charles Caldwell was her biological father. Zoe leaned in, tapping a specific highlighted section. Look here. According to the ancestry timeline, your mom worked at Savannah Memorial Hospital the year these markers trace back to. There was only one male attending physician of Mexican descent at that time. I froze. The name stared back at me like a punch to the chest. Dr. Miguel Alvarez, Chief of Surgery, Savannah Memorial Hospital. Zoe, I whispered, my throat dry. Already did. She smiled grimly. I found him. Still here in Savannah. Still Chief of Surgery. Never married. No known children. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. My phone buzzed violently across the table, interrupting the silence. I glanced down. Unknown number. I answered reluctantly. Nora, it's Marcus. My heart clenched. The last person I expected to hear from. Marcus? Yeah. We need to talk. It's about Brianna. It's important. An hour later, I sat across from Marcus Reed at River Street Cafe, the quiet clink of ceramic cups the only sound between us. He looked good. Success had clearly followed him since we split. Sharp-tailored suit, polished watch, confident posture. My stomach twisted painfully. I should have told you this years ago, he said finally, setting his coffee down and meeting my eyes. The week before we broke up, Brianna came to my office. She said you were cheating on me with Mike, my business partner. I stared at him, stunned, every muscle in my body locking in place. What? She had photos, Marcus continued, guilt heavy in his voice. You hugging him outside that sushi place downtown. She claimed you'd been meeting him secretly for months. I was so angry, I didn't even listen to you. I closed my eyes, the memory crashing back. That meeting had been the night I told Mike the investors approved funding for Marcus's startup. It had been a surprise, a gift. Marcus shook his head slowly. Mike confessed everything last year. He told me the truth. I know now you were innocent. I know Brianna staged the whole thing. I pressed my palms hard against the edge of the table, fighting the burn of betrayal and humiliation. She destroyed my career and my relationship, and for what? To take everything you had. His voice dropped as he reached for his phone. There's more. Last week, out of nowhere, Brianna contacted me again, told me she was sick, needed money for experimental treatments. Even hinted at getting married again, said it would help with her insurance coverage. I sat back in stunned disbelief, while rising in my throat. While she was begging me for bone marrow, she was also trying to trap you into marriage for health insurance. Marcus nodded, his expression darkening. I told her no. I exhaled sharply and stood, grabbing my purse. Thank you, Marcus, for telling me. Better late than never. As I stepped outside into the humid savannah air, my phone buzzed again. A message from Zoe. Got something. You need to come home. Urgent. I hurried back to my apartment, my heart hammering. Zoe barely waited for me to close the door before spinning her laptop around. Look. She pointed at the screen. Hospital records. 1991. Dr. Miguel Alvarez worked directly with Eleanor Caldwell for 6 months during her nursing rotation. I stared at the grainy scanned records, realization slamming into me like a freight train. He's her father, Zoe nodded solemnly. I called the hospital, he's still working. And Nora, he deserves to know. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered hesitantly. Nora, this is Dr. Miguel Alvarez. I believe we may need to speak. I stood outside Brianna's hospital room, my hand resting lightly against the cold metal frame. The soft beeping of monitors, the faint scent of antiseptic, and the distant murmur of nurses formed the unsettling soundtrack of this moment. Zoe touched my arm gently. You don't have to do this, she whispered. Yes, Ido. I smoothed my blazer out of reflex, the same habit I had perfected before every major research presentation, every grant meeting, every critical moment where I had to steel myself against judgment. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was dimly lit, the blinds drawn tight against the bright Georgia sun. Brianna sat propped up in bed, her skin pale and drawn, but her hair perfectly styled, her silk robe matching the trim of her designer pajamas. Even now, even facing death, she maintained her curated image. Without looking up, she spoke in that familiar, clipped voice. Well, look who finally decided to show up. Come to play the hero. I stayed near the door, arms crossed tightly against my chest. I came to give you my answer in person. At that, Brianna finally glanced up from her phone, her practiced smile faltering when she saw my expression. The answer is no. The phone slipped from her hand onto the white blanket. For a heartbeat, she just stared at me, eyes wide. You can't be serious. Dead serious! I moved a step closer, my voice low and controlled. Consider it karma. Her laugh was hollow brittle. Karma? For what? You're still bitter over that little misunderstanding with your job. I could feel the heat rising in my face despite myself. You destroyed my reputation. You sent Kayla Foster to lie under oath. You contacted the board anonymously and fed them false documents. 5 years of research gone. My career gone. All because you couldn't stand that I might succeed at something you couldn't control. She rolled her eyes and waved a delicate hand dismissively. Oh, please. You're always so dramatic, Nora. That research was going nowhere, and you know it. I did you a favor. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Don't you dare rewrite what happened. A nurse peeked into the room, her brows furrowed. Everything all right in here? Brianna's tone instantly softened, sugary sweet. Just fine. My sister was just leaving. I waited until the nurse withdrew, then stepped closer to Brianna's bed, my voice sharp as steel. Not quite yet. I want to hear you say it. Admit what you did. Tell me why. Brianna's gaze shifted away. The false confidence drained from her posture. Her shoulders sagged ever so slightly. You really want to know, she whispered bitterly. Because you deserved it. You were always so perfect, so smart, so dedicated. Poor little Nora, working day and night while I had to keep up appearances. I had to outshine you. I had to make sure I came first, no matter what it took. The words stung, even though I had suspected them for years. I stared at her coldly. By sabotaging me? Her lips twisted into a sad, tired smirk. By understanding how the world really works. Talent, integrity, none of that matters. What matters is who you can manipulate. I learned that from Mom. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped twice and held the glowing screen toward her. Want to hear something interesting? I'm dying, Nora. I don't have time for your games. Make time. I turned the screen fully toward her. See these genetic markers? I pointed to the highlighted section of the DNA report. They show paternity probability. Brianna stared hard at the display. The color slowly drained from her face as realization dawned. What is this? Proof, I said calmly. You and I don't share a father. You're not Charles Caldwell's daughter. Guess Mom's been keeping bigger secrets than just our feud. You're lying. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Am I? Ask her yourself. Watch how she reacts. But do it soon, Brianna. You're running out of time. Her voice cracked as desperation crept in. Just do it for Mom. Be useful for once. I leaned in close, locking eyes with her. You sound just like her. My tone hardened, final and cold. But here's the thing. I'm done being useful. Done being the family doormat. You want my bone marrow? Earn it. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. How? I straightened up slowly. Confess. The fake emails. The false reports. The lies about me and Marcus. Write it all down. Sign it. Notarize it. Maybe then we'll talk. Tears welled at the corners of her exhausted, fever-bright eyes. You'd let me die over this? I stared at her, feeling the weight of years of cruelty, betrayal, and manipulation settle firmly behind my words. No, Brianne. I'd let you die because you've never once faced consequences for your actions. I turned for the door, my hand steady now, my resolve clear. You have 3 days. Think about my offer. Zoe waited in the hallway exactly where I had left her. As I stepped into the sterile brightness, she raised an eyebrow. How'd it go? About as expected. I pressed the elevator button, the doors sliding open with a soft ding. She'll tell Mom about the DNA test within the hour, and then... I smiled coldly as we stepped inside. Then the real fun begins. The sunlight over Savannah was sharp and blinding as I walked up the stone steps of St. Patrick's Cathedral. Its red brick walls and tall stained glass windows had watched over decades of carefully crafted lies, and now they were about to bear witness to the unmasking. I found Father Daniel O'Connor in the garden, tending to his roses like he had every Tuesday morning for the past 30 years. His tall frame bent over a thorny bush, pruning shears glinting in the early light. Nora! He looked up, surprise flickering across his weathered face, quickly replaced by concern. Is that really you? I offered a thin, strained smile. Hello, Father, still fighting those aphids? He chuckled softly, wiping his hands on the front of his gardening apron. Some battles never end. What brings you back after all these years? I hesitated, glancing around the empty garden, then back at him. I need to ask you something about my mother and a man named Dr. Miguel Alvarez. The pruning shears fell from his hand, clattering loudly against the stone path. His expression drained of all warmth. "Come inside," he said quietly. The small office smelled exactly the same as I remembered. Books, old wood, stale coffee. Father Daniel closed the heavy oak door behind us, then sank heavily into his chair. "I assume this is about Brianna's condition," he said solemnly. "Your mother called me yesterday quite distraught." I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. "Did she tell you what I discovered?" He hesitated for just a fraction too long. "That Brianna isn't my father's daughter?" I pressed. "That she's Dr. Alvarez's child?" His eyes dropped to his folded hands. That was answer enough. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering. "You knew." "The seal of confession! Don't!" I snapped, slamming my palm down on the desk harder than intended. "I don't care about church rules right now. You watched my father die, thinking both his daughters were his. You watched my mother systematically destroy me to protect Brianna. You knew all of it." He sagged back, defeated. "I counseled your mother to tell the truth, many times, but she refused." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app, placing it gently on the desk between us. When did she first confess this to you?" His eyes closed as if bracing for impact. "It was September 1990, right after she found out she was pregnant. She came to me terrified that Charles would discover the affair. I did the math quickly. 3 months before she told my father she was expecting. Did she consider alternatives?" Father Daniel nodded slowly. "She considered everything. I convinced her to keep the baby." My phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I glanced down. A message from Zoe. "Dr. Alvarez just landed in Savannah. He's asking a lot of questions. How much should I tell him?" I stood abruptly. "One more question, Father. Did my mother ever express remorse? Not for the affair, for how she treated me afterward, for using me as a scapegoat my whole life." He couldn't meet my eyes. Silence hung heavy in the room. That was all the answer I needed. I picked up my phone, thumb hovering over Zoe's message. My decision had already been made. Tell him everything, every single detail. Zoe replied instantly. "Got it. Be careful. Your mom's been calling him nonstop since he landed." Even better. I slipped my phone back into my pocket as I walked briskly toward the cathedral door. The truth was no longer something I feared. It was my weapon now, and I intended to use it. The rain had begun to fall in thin sheets as I stood at my apartment window, watching Savannah's cobblestone streets glisten under the streetlights. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Zoe. "Dr. Alvarez checked into the Marriott downtown. Your mom just showed up there too. It's happening." I turned away from the window, the weight of everything building behind my ribs, my mother spiraling to hold onto what little control she had left. Brianna likely in her hospital bed, calculating her next move, and Miguel Alvarez completely unaware of the bombshell about to drop on his orderly life. The knock at my door was soft, cautious. I opened it to find Zoe holding her laptop. Her expression was serious. "I found something else." I gestured her inside and sat as she opened a new document. "What now?" Zoe scrolled down a list of internal hospital records. It wasn't just Jushi hurt. During that same year at Coastal Biomedical Research, Eleanor filed a false misconduct complaint against another young female researcher, Olivia Sharp. Drove her out completely. It was covered up, but look. The old HR file flashed on the screen. Terminated under ethical violations that never held up. Olivia Sharp had never worked in research again. I closed my eyes, sickened. She did it before. I was just next. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window again. She never cared about protecting Brianna. She cared about protecting herself, her image. Zoe nodded grimly. "There's a pattern. That's what makes this worse." I inhaled slowly, grounding myself. "Then it's time to end this." I grabbed the file folder containing both Brianna's signed preliminary confession and the DNA report. They want something from me. I'll give them my terms. The hospital conference room smelled faintly of bleach and desperation. I waited at the long wooden table, watching the clock tick mercilessly forward. The door opened sharply. My mother walked in first, every step calculated and perfectly measured despite the storm brewing inside her. Her pearl earrings were back in place, her game face restored. Behind her, Brianna was wheeled in by a nurse. She looked worse, pale, hollow-eyed, thin. The designer robe had been replaced by a standard hospital gown. She gave me a bitter smile, the last remnants of false superiority barely flickering. I stood slowly, meeting them both with even calm. Let's talk terms. Eleanor dropped heavily into the chair across from me. You can't possibly be serious. Oh, I'm very serious. I slid the papers onto the table. You get my bone marrow under 3 conditions. Their eyes flicked nervously to the documents as I laid them out one by one. First, full public confession from both of you. My mother acknowledges the affair with Dr. Alvarez, the deception of Charles Caldwell, and the false accusations that destroyed my career. Second, Brianna confesses fully to every action she took to sabotage my life. The falsified complaints, the fake photographs, the fabricated relationship lies, all notarized and delivered to every institution and publication that blacklisted me. Brianna opened her mouth to object, but I raised my hand, cutting her off. Third, Dr. Alvarez is to have unrestricted access to Brianna if he chooses to pursue a relationship as her biological father. No contacte blocos, no manipulação, no interferência. My mother's perfectly controlled mask cracked just slightly. You're blackmailing us. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze coldly. I learned from the best. The door opened again and Zoe stepped inside, silently taking a seat along the wall as my witness. The room fell deathly quiet. The only sound was the rain tapping steadily against the window and the soft beeping of Brianna's heart monitor as she stared down at the papers with shaking hands. You have until tomorrow at noon, I said finally. No signatures, no donation. I stood and gathered my things, my voice sharp and calm. You taught me everything I know about power plays, now it's my turn. The hospital conference room felt colder the next morning. It was early, barely 7 a.m. The sky outside still a bruised violet as the sun struggled to rise over the savannah skyline. I sat at the same seat, the same stack of papers in front of me, hands folded calmly as I waited. The door swung open sharply. My mother entered first, tightly clutching her designer purse like a life raft. Her posture was rigid, chin lifted as though she could hold the weight of everything crashing down with sheer force of will. The nurse wheeled Brianna in next. She looked worse than yesterday. Fragile, sunken cheeks, deep dark circles under her eyes. Yet even now, even at rock bottom, I caught the faint flicker of defiance in her expression as she avoided my gaze. The last to enter was Dr. Miguel Alvarez. His presence was undeniable. Tall, poised, immaculate in a tailored charcoal suit, but with hard lines of pain and betrayal carved deep into his features. When his dark eyes landed on my mother, they burned with fury barely contained. Let's begin, I said, sliding a set of printed DNA results across the table. Everyone in this room has questions. Today we get answers. Miguel spoke first, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Stephanie, how could you keep my daughter from me for 32 years? My mother flinched at the use of her first name. I was protecting my family. By destroying mine? His hand slammed onto the table, papers jumping under the force. I had a right to know. You were married, she fired back immediately, almost reflexively. I was divorced, he snapped, chest heaving. You knew that. We talked about it. The night his voice cracked as he glanced toward Brianna. The night everything changed. The monitor beside Brianna beeped steadily, filling the thick silence. I told you I miscarried, my mother whispered. You lied. His voice shook with disbelief. You let me transfer out of state, thinking our child never existed. I cleared my throat and pushed Brianna's confession across the table. Speaking of lies, let's discuss the other half of this nightmare. Brianna paled as I began to read aloud from her written admission. I falsified research misconduct claims against Nora Caldwell. I collaborated with Kayla Foster to fabricate evidence. I contacted Marcus Reed with fake photos to destroy Nora's relationship. Stop. My mother stood abruptly, her voice trembling. This isn't necessary. Yes, it is. My voice sliced cleanly through the air. This is the moment of reckoning for both of you. I slid the second page across the table. Tell them, Mom. Tell everyone how you groomed Brianna since childhood to believe I was her enemy, to believe she had to destroy me to win your approval. My mother's lips parted soundlessly, then closed again. Her hands trembled violently as she sank back into her chair, eyes glassy and defeated. Dr. Alvarez lifted the letter, reading silently, his expression darkening line by line. His knuckles whitened against the paper. You used our daughter as a weapon, he said at last. You turned her against her own sister. They're not sisters, my mother snapped impulsively, the words exploding from her like venom. She clapped a hand over her mouth a second too late. The room froze. Even the steady beep of the heart monitor seemed to hesitate. I inhaled slowly, turning my gaze toward Brianna. No, we're not. My voice softened. And now we all know why. Brianna's face crumpled, tears streaming silently down her hollow cheeks. I never knew about any of this about him, about you. I only knew what Mom told me, but you knew what you were doing when you destroyed my career, I said evenly, unflinching. You knew what you were doing when you tried to steal Marcus. Brianna nodded miserably, shoulders shaking as she wiped her face with trembling fingers. Because she said you'd always try to overshadow me, that you'd use your success to prove I was worthless. Enough! Dr. Alvarez's voice cracked like a whip, sharp and unforgiving. Stephanie, you're going to face legal consequences for paternity fraud. As for you, he turned to me, are you really willing to let her die to prove a point? I pulled out one final document from my folder, sliding it across to him. No. I'm willing to donate under very specific conditions. My mother lunged instinctively toward the document, but I held it back with a flick of my wrist. First, full public confessions from both of you, submitted to every academic journal and news outlet that tarnished my name. Second, an official statement to every medical licensing board, clearing my record completely. Third, full access for Dr. Alvarez if he wishes to have a relationship with Brianna. You're blackmailing us, my mother whispered in disbelief. I met her eyes, voice low and unwavering. I'm using the only language you ever taught me. The heart monitor beside Brianna spiked suddenly as she gasped and clutched her side. A nurse rushed in immediately. Her blood pressures dropping, the nurse barked. We have to move her now. As they prepared to wheel Brianna out, she grabbed my hand weakly. Her skin was ice cold against mine. I'll sign anything, just please help me. I stared at her for a long, silent moment, past the manipulation, past the betrayal, to the frail woman underneath who had finally cracked. You'll tell the truth about everything? Yes, she whispered desperately. I'm so tired of lies. Then, I said softly as they pulled her away, I'll help you. Dr. Alvarez stepped close to me as the door swung closed. His expression softened just slightly. You're a stronger person than I could ever be. I shook my head, exhausted. No, I'm exactly what they made me. Zoe approached with the final paperwork in hand. Everything's ready for both the donation and the confessions. I gathered my coat and bag. Good, let's finish this. The sterile white walls of the hospital room glowed softly under the afternoon light, filtering through half-drawn blinds. I sat motionless in the visitor's chair by the window, staring blankly at the Savannah skyline. Rain streaked across the glass like silent tears. The procedure had gone as planned. The marrow donation left me sore, exhausted, but strangely satisfied. My phone buzzed against the armrest. I picked it up slowly, already knowing who it was. "Have you seen the headlines?" Zoe's voice crackled with barely contained excitement. I leaned my head back against the cool wall and closed my eyes. "I have." Prominent researcher cleared of misconduct, the first article had proclaimed that morning. Family fraud scandal rocks Savannah medical community, followed by distinguished surgeon discovers long-lost daughter. Every journal that had blacklisted me was falling over itself to retract their statements, apologize publicly, and offer back the opportunities they had so easily stolen. "It's amazing what the truth can do," I murmured, rubbing absent-mindedly at the bandaged spot on my hip. "Brianna's responding well to treatment," Zoe added more softly. "Her latest tests came back good." I opened my eyes and stared out at the rain. "I know. Are you going to visit her?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I rose wearily and opened it to find my mother standing there, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Gone was the icy mask, the perfect posture. She looked human. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside, but kept my distance as she walked in and sat heavily on the edge of my couch, clutching her handbag like a shield. "Brianna's asking for you," she said softly. "I'm sure she is." "Nora, please!" My mother looked up at me, her eyes hollow, her voice shaking. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I probably never will. But I am sorry. For everything." I said nothing. Slowly, she reached into her purse and pulled out a worn leather photo album. "I found these while packing up the house. Before I sell it," I frowned. "You're selling the house?" She nodded, brushing an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. "Dr. Alvarez's lawyers suggested it, to pay for Brianna's ongoing treatment and reparations to you." I opened the album slowly, my breath catching unexpectedly at the images. Me at elementary school science fairs, clutching trophies, birthday parties where we both smiled before everything fractured, family holidays frozen in snapshots of a life that now felt like fiction. "I destroyed something precious," my mother whispered, her voice breaking. "Something that could have been beautiful." My phone buzzed again. A text from Dr. Alvarez. "Brianna's latest tests look good. She's asking about you again." I closed the album slowly, rain still tapping softly against the window. The war was over, but the scars would remain. The hospital room was brighter this time, sunlight spilling warmly across the crisp sheets, chasing away the shadows that had lived there for weeks. I stood at the threshold, heart tight in my chest. Brianna looked up when I entered. Her face had color again, her eyes clearer than I had seen in years. She smiled faintly, a hesitant, fragile thing that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You came," she whispered. I did. I walked to the chair beside her bed and sat. Zoe lingered by the door, watching quietly. Brianna reached shakily toward the bedside table and pulled out a thick envelope. "Mom gave me her full confession yesterday. I know she gave you a copy too." I nodded. "Did you read it?" she asked. "Not yet." "It's worse than we thought," Brianna whispered, eyes glistening. "The things she did, the way she turned us against each other." I said nothing. Brianna stared at the envelope in her lap. "I know sorry isn't enough, but I am sorry. I don't know if we'll ever be what we were supposed to be, but I want to try and fix what I broke." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. She opened a second folder, sliding signed legal documents toward me. "I've already contacted every institution that blacklisted you. I told them everything. And I'm signing over my entire trust fund to your research. It's yours now." I stared down at the folder, fingers brushing over the papers, stunned into silence. "Please," she whispered, "let me do this one good thing before it's too late." My phone buzzed. A new message from Dr. Alvarez. Having dinner with both my daughters would mean everything to me. "Please say yes." I stared out the window at the quiet Savannah streets below. The rain had stopped. A brilliant rainbow arched high above the river like nature itself was offering some strange, unexpected promise. "We can't go back," I said, finally, closing the folder. "We can't be the sisters we should have been." Brianna nodded, her voice small. "I know, but maybe we can be something new, something honest." I stood and smiled, faintly for the first time in a long time. "Dinner," I said simply. "We'll start there." As I walked toward the door, Zoe touched my arm gently. "You okay?" I paused and glanced back at Brianna, the photo album tucked under my arm, the signed confessions a weight I was finally ready to carry. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be."